edema. Now regarding the veins, you have a set of superior thyroid veins and you have a set of inferior thyroid veins. Now the superior thyroid veins, they will drain into the brachiocephalic vein over here. Now the superior thyroid vein will drain into the internal jugular vein. So you have the internal jugular vein over here passing in this direction. So the superior thyroid veins drain into the internal jugular vein. Much more prominent than the superior thyroid veins are the middle thyroid veins. The middle thyroid veins will also drain into the internal jugular vein, but the inferior thyroid vein will drain into the brachiocephalic vein. So over here, by the emergence of the subclavian, we have formed one brachiocephalic vein, and this is the left brachiocephalic vein. And the left brachiocephalic vein is forming another internal jugular and subclavian vein. So this is the left brachiocephalic vein coming over to the right side, and the two brachiocephalic veins together, they are going to form the superior vena cava. So the inferior thyroid veins actually drain into the left brachiocephalic vein, whereas the superior and middle thyroid veins, they drain into the internal jugular vein, of which the middle thyroid vein is most prominent. And when you are dissecting the thyroid, you will first come across the middle thyroid vein. Occasionally you can have an additional vein called the vein of Cocker, which also usually drains into the internal jugular vein or into the subclavian vein. But you don't have to remember all that. You have to mainly remember that you have a superior, middle and inferior thyroid veins. Inferior thyroid veins are multiple. They arise from the lower border of the isthmus. Middle thyroid vein is the most prominent single vein that you are going to get. Now about the nerve supply of the thyroid, because the thyroid is an endocrine gland, you know that the thyroid gland secretes thyroid hormones, that is T3 and T4, that is thyroxine and triiodothyronine, and it is a gland which concentrates iodine. Not just the thyroid gland, even salivary glands concentrate iodine for that matter, but thyroid gland does it at a much more rapid rate. It's a much more avid binder of the iodine substance. But anyway, the thyroid gland secretes the thyroid hormones T3 and T4, and it secretes calcitonin. So the and again stuck onto the thyroid glands, you have the parathyroid glands. Now these parathyroid glands, the thyroid glands are important for the developing stages of life, but the parathyroid glands are more important for survival. Now if you don't have the these parathyroid glands along with calcitonin, it maintains the blood calcium level, and if you don't have the parathyroid glands, then the calcium level in the blood is going to fall, and you are going to have what we call hypocalcemic tetany. Now the features of tetany and what happens and how you treat it is much more to do with physiology. So you have over here on one hand within the thyroid follicles, in between the follicles or in the basement membrane of the follicles, you have the calcitonin secreting cells. Now this calcitonin hormone lowers the calcium level. So if you have features of hypercalcemia, you can inject calcitonin and try to bring down the calcium so that this increased calcium does not cause any damage. On the other hand, parathormone is the hormone which maintains the blood calcium. It mobilizes calcium from bones, increase absorption from the GIT, and it tries to raise the blood calcium. Whereas calcitonin depresses the blood calcium, and parathormone, vitamin D and calcitonin, they are all involved in this calcium metabolism. So the important thing, although the secretions of the thyroid is controlled by TSH, thyroid secreting hormone, and that is controlled by the TRH, that is thyrotropin secreting hormone of the hypothalamus. However, the thyroid gland does have a rich sympathetic innervation. So these sympathetic nerves, how much these sympathetic nerves actually are responsible for thyroid hormone secretion is not clear, but the thyroid hormone is supplied by sympathetic nerves mainly from the middle cervical ganglion, that is C5 C6 according to our calculations, but partly also by the superior and inferior cervical ganglia. So you have direct branches to the thyroid from the cervical ganglia and the cervical part of the sympathetic trunk. Apart from that, you have a sympathetic nerve net over the external carotid artery, part of which spills over to the superior thyroid artery. So from that source also you can have a sympathetic supply to the thyroid gland. So although the thyroid gland is supplied by sympathetic nerves, we don't know how these sympathetic nerves enhance the function of the thyroid gland. So arterial supply, venous drainage, nerve supply. Now lymphatics of the thyroid gland, laterally these lymphatic nerves drain into the paratracheal lymph nodes. So the pre and paratracheal lymph nodes on either side going on to the lower group of deep cervical lymph nodes, and above they drain into the pre-laryngeal lymph nodes. So pre-laryngeal, pretracheal and paratracheal lymph nodes, and finally into the deep cervical lymph nodes. That is the lymphatic drainage of the thyroid gland. Now a little bit about the development, although this is not a development class, still a little bit of the development of the thyroid gland. Now the thyroid gland actually develops from two sources. There is a median thyroid diverticulum and there is a lateral thyroid rudiment. Now this median thyroid diverticulum, where does it come from? When you have the development of the tongue and you have the anterior 2/3 and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue developing, the anterior 2/3 of the tongue develops from the lingual swellings and the tuberculum impar, and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue develops from the hypobranchial eminence. So partly it develops from the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, it develops from the first pharyngeal or first branchial arch, and the posterior develops from the third branchial arch. So you have the lingual swellings and the tuberculum impar of the first arch, and you have the hypobranchial eminence of the third arch, and between these two you have a depression called the foramen caecum, and from this foramen caecum you have a tube which plunges down. So let us draw it properly like this, and from this junction you have a tube which plunges down, and this tube is called the thyroglossal duct, and this thyroglossal duct actually plunges down from the junction between the developing anterior 2/3 and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, and below the tongue somewhere here you have the developing hyoid bone, and this thyroglossal duct, it makes a loop below the body of the hyoid, and then it descends down onto the front of the thyroid cartilage. So when it has reached the level of the thyroid cartilage, there it separates into two parts, and you have clusters of glandular elements developing from these two branches of the median thyroid diverticulum. Now this is joined by the lateral thyroid eminence by the ultimobranchial body. Now this ultimobranchial body is from the fourth pharyngeal pouch. Now of the 6 branchial arches, the fifth thus disappears. So actually you ultimately have 5 arches, and between the 5 arches you are going to get 4 pouches. So from the fourth pouch you also have this developing lateral thyroid eminence. So median thyroid eminence and lateral thyroid rudiments. So one develops from the medial, this thyroglossal duct, and one develops from the ultimobranchial body of the fifth pharyngeal pouch. These two together form the thyroid gland. So because it develops from the developing GIT, the upper part, from the oropharyngeal part, so therefore the thyroid gland we will consider to be one of the glands which is actually composite in development. And this composite development, now the parafollicular cells that are actually formed between the follicles of the thyroid gland, where these parafollicle cells are coming from. Now one view is that these lateral thyroid elements coming from the ultimobranchial body, they are forming the parafollicular cells, and another view is the neural crest cells that are migrating all over the central axis of the body. These neural crest cells form the parafollicular cells of the thyroid. Now you can see that this is the pathway of the thyroglossal duct, and because this is the pathway of the thyroglossal duct, in the journey of the formation of the thyroid gland, if it is interrupted at any point, then you can have additional thyroid tissue anywhere. You can have a lingual thyroid, you can have a subhyoid thyroid. So at any point along the journey of the thyroglossal duct, you can have additional thyroid tissue. Not only that, any part of this thyroglossal duct, if it is not obliterated, it can give rise to thyroglossal cysts, and these thyroglossal cysts can be usually in the midline of the neck, in front of the hyoid, but also behind the body of the hyoid. You can also have a small cyst arising behind the body of the hyoid, because the thyroglossal duct makes a small loop behind the body of the hyoid. Anyway, these things are to be covered in embryology. Now as far as the histology of the thyroid gland is concerned, In histology, you already know that the thyroid gland, the stroma divides it into several lobules, and each of these lobules contain multiple follicles like this, and all of these follicles are lined by cubical cells, which when they are active become columnar, and when they are quiescent they remain cubical. So these follicles are lined by cubical cells, cubical to columnar cells, and within the lumen of these follicles you have the colloid. Colloid consisting of thyroglobulin. This colloid is not blue in fact, but in staining it takes a light pink color. So you have a colloid like this, colloid, and you have this in all of these follicles, and in between the follicles you have the parafollicular cells, clusters of parafollicular cells secreting calcitonin. So this is what the thyroid gland looks like. It is a follicular type of endocrine gland. It has follicles with lining cubical to columnar cells, a central portion containing the lumen in which you have the colloid of thyroglobulin, and in between the follicles you have the parafollicular cells. Now when you are palpating the thyroid gland, you have to keep in mind that if the thyroid gland is obviously swollen, that which we call goiter, any swelling of the thyroid gland is called a goiter. Now if you have an obviously enlarged thyroid gland, then there is no difficulty in palpating. But sometimes the thyroid gland is not so obviously enlarged, but during routine tests or on clinical suspicion, you have done a TCT4 TSH and you find that the patient is either hypothyroid or hyperthyroid, and then you want to feel the thyroid gland. It is not that thyroid gland will always be enlarged when patient is hyperthyroid or thyrotoxic. The patient can also be the thyroid gland can be also felt in hypothyroid patients when there is nodularity or some sort of malignancy or cyst of the thyroid. So whenever you have abnormalities of the thyroid, it is always a good idea that you try to palpate the thyroid. Now thyroid gland is felt in the neck best from behind. It's not easy. You cannot always feel a very small or enlarged thyroid gland from front, but it is easy to feel it with your fingers from behind. And when you feel it on the midline, just below the Adam's apple or the laryngeal eminence, up to the margins of the sternocleidomastoid. So from the laryngeal eminence, just below the laryngeal cartilage up to the sternocleidomastoid, this is the area where you are going to feel for the thyroid gland. So palpating the thyroid gland for a generalized diffused enlargement, and careful palpation for small nodules inside the thyroid gland, which may be functional, may be non-functional, they may be cysts, they may be tumors, and often these individual nodules are so small and dispersed that even after careful palpation from behind or from front, you cannot understand that their gland is nodular. In that case, you might have to take the help of ultrasonography also. Anyway, I think I've taken up much of your time, and I think by these videos we are trying to attempt to cover a lot of ground. It is not possible to cover gross anatomy, embryology, histology, everything in one sitting, but because we are so short of time and there is so much of a pressure of the syllabus on us, so I think there is nothing else to do. Thank you for giving me a patient hearing. See you again soon.